Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. Sober Experience. I hope you guys are hanging in there. We took like a week or so off to gather ourselves, but we are back. We're in the motherfucking building. We're going to set this thing off the right way. Little Terror Zone. Bringing us back into the loop. Come on. Let me grab my drink. Strawberry Monster. This shit was hard, man. It was hard. Boom, 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 boom. This is when everybody starts getting crazy. All right, Spider. All right. Otherwise, I'm going to end up, punching holes in my own self, in my face. Let me shut off the speaker. Biggadoo. Sometimes like a lot of thought goes into what I'm going to play, if I'm going to play some music, if I'm not going to play any music. I got to record like a new intro since we changed the name, and we've been getting a lot more action, which is nice. Please like, subscribe, and share on all podcast platforms. You can text these, whatever. You're going to share however you want to share it to everybody you love, everybody you hate. Like, oh, there's this guy in Brooklyn. He's got a show. He just talks a lot of shit. He's been sober a long time. He's got a handle on some things, and is pretty honest with himself, And I'm a little bit, I'm pretty honest with you guys too. So yeah. So I was either gonna play that record. I had this other record queued up. Maybe I'll play it on the way out. It was like, GMK 3, which is from my old school Rockland heads, old school New York hardcore heads. That was Terror Zone. R.I.P. to Kevin. Yeah, Kevin. He was in jail most of my the time that I was around, but whatever. And he just passed away not that long ago. And he was a singer in this band Bulldoze. Biggest record was, Nothing But a Beat Down. That's how crazy that time was. Yeah, so that was cool. It's funny because I just texted my boy Ang because I was cleaning up my my work area, my shop, and I came across I don't know why I call him this. On YouTube it said like Danny Diablo, but I know him as Isaac, from Crown of Thorns and Scarhead. So anyway, there was an interview with him and that guy from No Jumper. I don't know his name. Adam 22. I'm only seeing it because apparently he his wife or whatever is a porn star, and I don't know. I guess they have some sex tape out or something. I don't know. I'm not really interested. He's an interesting guy. I see him like peripherally. He's like in and out of things that I like. So, but I don't listen to his show. As don't. I don't have anything against it, but I don't, I only have so much time, so much bandwidth. Anyway, but it was funny to see Isaac, aka Danny Diablo. I don't know what else he can go by, on there, just talking about the old school days in the 90s, in New York City. Those were my heydays, It was wild. It was a wild fucking time. And and I used to go see his band play, Crown of Thorns and Scarhead. All those like DMS bands. Madball. Like, yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, I can't even remember all the names. It was so long ago. Whatever. What is that? 20 years ago? Maybe 25 years ago? I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, it was good to just see, this guy. It almost, I looked at his life. I just looked at him, and not in a judgmental way, because he's a real motherfucker, and he's also a Puerto Rican Jew, which I am as well. And, bro, if I never, well, he's got a different life than me, because he's a world-renowned rock star, whatever, in a small scene, but a very important scene. And he's a big deal, and he's somebody that I, at the time, I admired, and I respect him now for the work he's put in. But it was just like, yeah, like I would have turned into that minus all the rock star stuff, So this guy was sharing at a meeting yesterday, and it's funny because this is all like kind of intertwined. What he was talking about, he was a musician, and he said it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and then it just became, rock and roll and drugs or whatever. Like there was no sex, and then it just became drugs and alcohol, and that would have been it. And that was like my whole life. That was my whole life. But I was like a spectator. I never sang in any bands or any of that kind of stuff. But I was in the street. That's what I was. That's where I was. That's what I was doing. I was in the street. Yeah, so it was funny. So I get to see him, give this interview, and yeah, like if I never got my act together, never got cleaned up, and never got sober, that's what that would have been me, in that sense, and yeah, just like not in a judgmental way, but just in a different way, because I was just such an angry kid, I was just an angry kid, man. I was an angry kid, and I came from an angry home. Well, at least half of it was. Like my dad is an angry guy. And it's funny because he's telling stories about his dad. It makes me think about like my dad. And, and why we were just so angry. I think I was born. I don't think I was born angry. I was probably born agitated. And it was exasperated by, by my house. My dad, nothing was ever good enough, and my mom was how she was, and that was it. And there was a lot of alcohol, and there was a lot of yelling, and there was a lot of whatever. I don't like to say like, bro, I don't know anybody's house that didn't really have that. Look, there was a guy down the street it was a Pakistani family, and they were Muslim, and they were great, and I loved them. And I'm not speaking maybe I'm speaking at a school. I don't know. Sorry. But I remember, and I was friends with the kid, and I loved the kid. And I don't know what his mom did. I can say in theory maybe what might have happened, but I'm not sure because I was a young kid. But I know she came to my house. She maybe did something, and his dad slapped up his mom, and it was wild. And I was like, okay, well, I guess, you don't need drugs and alcohol to be smacking anybody around. So, yeah, so I think it was also just the time. My dad, I talk a lot about him because, there was no internet. It was just what you saw. It was like an everyday life, So I remember, my dad was like a rough and tumble guy. And I don't even know if I was really, I don't even think I was made like that. I think my mom is such a sweetheart. My mom, I only heard of her, aside from kicking the shit out of us, I only heard about her actually one time. Somebody said this story where, where she taught in a public school in the South Bronx, PS 161. And, yeah, it was in a rough neighborhood. It's funny because my boy sent me a listing for a laundromat that is near that neighborhood, so we can buy it. And I'm like, dude, I know where that is, and that place is still the trap. Anyway, point of the story is, it's in a bad neighborhood, impoverished, fucked up place, right? So my mom was in this school, and some guy, a neighborhood pedophile, whatever, animal, gets into the school, grabs like 2 girls or 3, I don't know how many girls there were, but little kids, has them in the bathroom and is like peeing on them, urinating on them. Disgusting. Dog. And my mom saw it somehow, I don't know, and she chased the guy so that and was like yelling and whatever, making commotion, so I guess security or other male teachers could help. And she jumped on top of him and started banging him in his fucking head with a spiked heel from her heel, and just she was kicking the shit out of him, and rightfully so. So that was like the only time that I peripherally heard that. I heard that story. But yeah, so my mom wasn't like that, but my dad needs, I don't know, my dad strangled a couple of kids in the neighborhood. He beat up the neighbors. Just one of them. The other one, he was handicapped. So, but my dad, so my dad let him slide on a bunch of stuff. But one guy who was like next to us, my dad fucked him up, I think like twice. A couple fights in the store, a couple fights in the street. I legit probably saw him fuck people up maybe, I don't know, 7, 8 times, which is a lot when you think about it, from age, 0 to 10. I think 10, I was 10 or 11 years old the last time I saw him really really beat somebody up, And, so that was, that was there. And I don't even know why. And it's funny because he would, there would be situations where people would call him and he would go fight, his friend. He had a friend that was a contractor, this guy, I don't want to say his name. The guy was getting pushed around, whatever. My dad went over there and fucking smacked the guy with a fucking bat. And my dad had no problem hitting people with baseball bats. So it's funny. I hate to say it's funny, but I don't know any other way to talk. I'm sorry. But when you see stuff in movie, oh man, this guy's hitting him with a fucking bat. And everybody wants to be tough. I'll hit him with a pipe. I'll do this. I'll do that. But dude, when you see somebody get hit with a fucking baseball bat, everything stops, man. Fucking everything stops. You're like, fuck, whoa. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Just everything stops. And that's it. So it's, yeah. So anyway, so Isaac was telling stories like that about his dad, and there's a reason why he was like that. And, I wasn't really, really like that. I mean, but I was just angry. And that was it. I was just an angry adolescent kid, and I would go to these hardcore shows, and, we would just we were like a gang of misfit kids. We'd go and we'd get drunk and we'd get crazy, and then there were people who were really fucking crazy, and then there were people like us who were just half crazy. But our half crazy is different than a normal person's crazy. I remember yeah. But I also know deep inside my brain, I know the times that I wussed out, and that made it worse for the next person, because I was like, I punked out this time in 7th grade and this time in 10th grade. And so all the ones in between, if I got involved, I was seriously involved, and I lost a lot, and I didn't care, and that was okay. So saying that to say that they were talking about how on this interview how these hardcore shows now And at the time they were like, they were like skinhead shows, and people think like skinheads are like neo-Nazi, like whatevers. And yeah, that was not the case. In New York City, there were a lot of Puerto Rican dudes that were like skinheads, straight up. And it wasn't like Jenny Jones' show or any of this other stuff. They were all maniacs, but that's just what it was. A lot of them were Spanish. A lot of them were fucking Spanish, Spanish, whatever, Irish, Italian, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, but they were saying that, like, now, like, the kids that come to these shows, they're like fucking dweebs, And yeah. And I don't know, maybe I was a dweeb on the inside, and I was just so scared that people would know. So I made myself like an animal on the outside. But then, if you think about it logically, however you behave is who you are. So I guess that maybe I was an animal. I was. And I was like really unhinged. And yeah, and I was too crazy for even my own parents or my own dad. And I was fully addicted to alcohol and drugs from the time I was 12. Fully, every day, daily alcohol, drug user. Never said no. Only said no to crack cocaine. That was the only thing I ever said no to. Anyway, so I'm saying that because it was a wild fucking ride. And it was crazy. So after, yesterday, I'm saying that so I can maybe tie this in. I'm thinking out loud. Because yesterday, I go to this meeting, and afterwards we go to the diner and we chill, and it's cool. And, like, these kids are, like, young. Like, some of them, whatever. I'm, like, older than a lot of them. And I don't mind. I love them. I fucking love them. And then we're going around like, oh, they're in their 30s. 32, 33. There was a kid that was there that was, like, the boyfriend of this girl. And this motherfucker was younger than my son. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? But not in a bad way, in a good way. I'm like, dude, this kid is like literally younger than my son. And we're at a diner and we're eating and we're talking about sobriety and we're talking about, just regular life stuff. And then they were all like, yo, a lot of like these two girls, like my homegirl Sam, who is like my little grilled cheese buddy, even though she fronted yesterday and got some other shit. Oh, she got BLT. So me and my man Luke, we held the grilled cheeses down. This place makes pretty good grilled cheese, and I get my shit on rye with bacon, keeping it fucking Jewish, keeping it Puerto Rican. That's what, shout out to Luke. You made the observation, boy. Anyway, so like they were like, yeah, we came at like 22 or 20 or 23 to a couple of meetings, but, I was no way near ready to get sober at that age. And I was like, and then I was talking, I was like, yeah, it's like I was 24 when I got sober, and by 24, I had lived the life all the way to somebody who was, I don't know. At 24, I already had like an 8-year-old kid. I think I was 8 when my son got sober. When I got sober, I think my son was 8. So I already had a kid. I already been locked up a bunch of times. I already did all this maniac stuff. Like, all right, so like my career started, drinking and drugging every day. Then I'm like skipping school. I'm in the seventh grade. It was summer before 7th grade. I started hanging out, smoking weed, drinking. And in my home, guess what? When you're 14, you're allowed to drink. And I was. And I drank at parties. I drank whenever. I would come home with 40s and put them in the fridge, right? And my mom would be like, yo, why do you have this big freaking beer all to yourself? You look like a pig. That's what she would say. She said, you look like a pig. Like, you don't have, like, there's nothing for anybody else. This whole big thing is for you. And I was just like, I was like, dude, it's $2.50. That's why I bought it. not going to buy I wasn't even at the age where I'm going to buy like a 6-pack, drink like a gentleman. And that's what she was saying. But meanwhile, she would take a cup of it, And what was it? It was well, by that time I drank Crazy Horse for a little bit, but then it changed the name. It changed to Hurricane because American Indians went wild. They're like, and I remember people like, oh my God, Crazy Horse is changing its name. And I was like, change it to Hurricane, I guess, or whatever, right? That was the folklore. Meanwhile, the other folklore was that if you drank Crazy Horse, it would make you freaking crazy. So, of course, that's what I did. I drank that, and then I drank the other stuff. Hurricane. I saw there'd be a 40, a Hurricane, maybe a Budweiser 40. I drank those here and there. Budweiser is good for a nice, it's good until you have that first pee, and then it's over. But and I drank a lot of Old English. Oh, my God. Oldie. Oh, my God. That was like my friend. Old Gold. That's what I used to call it, Old Gold. So anyway, I was allowed to drink in my house, and I already stopped going to school on a regular basis by 7th grade, 8th grade maybe. I met this girl up the block, and no, that was in high school. Okay, so 14, 15. Yeah, so anyway, so I started hanging out. I just started hanging out. And I never stopped. And it was everything that, what could it be? I barely went to school. When I mean barely, I was there maybe a couple of periods a day, a couple of days a week. I went there to make a few bucks. I was selling like bullshit weed. I was ready, and just cutting school, hanging out with kids that were in high school, kids that were committing crimes, like big time crimes. Like I was like bullshitting, like fucking joyriding, stealing cars, and that kind of stuff. I knew somebody by that time I knew somebody who killed somebody. I was like, oh my God, this guy's in jail for killing somebody, I hang out with these other kids, and who also became infamous because they killed somebody and went to jail like forever. So, you have all this adolescent angst, and I'm just like, I'm caught in I'm in the web. I'm caught in the motherfucking web, right? And it's just getting, that elevator only goes down. So by 15, I'm already, whatever. If I start at 12, by 13, by 14, I don't know, 14, first time in the hospital. I'm sure I shared that story 100 times. I'm not going to share it again. I was already taking acid, mushrooms. I think I did cocaine only a couple of times. Acid, mushrooms, pot, a lot of alcohol. Maybe. Oh, Special K, bro. Special K came into the fucking, Special K came into the place. There was a girl who sold it down at Caffeine Jones in New City. I was like swimming around there because I was wearing out my welcome in like the neighborhood because I was already impregnated, at the time my friend's sister, because when I drink and I do drugs, there's nothing off limit. And I did all of that on a resentment. I had a big resentment against my sister. R.I.P. to her. It was her birthday this past week. My sister used to sleep with like my friends, and it used to make me mad. But I think when you're a teenager, that's just what happens. You just do with whomever is right next to you, But so I did it back to him, and except the baby came out. So that's how my son came. But even before that, again, trouble with the law. I was thrown out of school. I was thrown out of school. What happened? What did I do? Oh, I already had such a bad reputation in junior high that somebody was smoking weed in the locker room or something, and the gym teacher came in, and he trapped me and my friend Kareem in the room, and he was like, oh, you guys are smoking weed in here? And I looked at him, and I was like, fucking no way. I was like, dude, and I smoke weed, but I was not smoking weed in here. and I just wasn't that day. But it didn't matter. They called the fucking police. The police came. Blah blah blah. You know, I'm stretching my back. Yeah, so it was just already unmanageability. You know, the police would come. I was breaking into places. You know, I remember it was like around that time. No, yeah, I was like 13 or 14. So these are all like base. It almost seems like in 1 year, but it was like over a 3-year span. I remember because I had my first beeper in the 7th grade, and the school was like, bro, why do you have they took my beeper. They called my dad like, yo, your son has a beeper. My dad was like, oh my God, you have a fucking beeper? I was like, yeah. And he was like, great. Now I know, you know, I can find you now, you know, because I had already gotten to the point where I was like, dude, I'm just going to take the beating. So I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And I'm just going to take the beating. And that's it. So I guess to protect his own sanity, and, you know, I had already like really, I don't know. I think if I was doing that stuff now, they would have 100% tried to medicate me. And they just didn't. And oh my God, I attacked my dad with a fucking knife in front of my whole family. Like, it was crazy. I tried to stab him up. Thank God that everybody was holding me and holding him, because he would have just fucking killed me. He would have been like, I would have like swung it one time. He would have been like, what? Bang, bang. He would have just pieced me up in front of everybody. And rightfully so. You know, rightfully so. I was just having a bad moment and a bad reaction to like some stupid shit that was going on. So, you know, and I think just some people are born like that. Like you have maybe, I don't know, too much testosterone, and it's uncontrollable, and it's like a nuclear bomb, and then there's drugs and there's alcohol, and that was it. That was it. So I got kicked out of school. You know, the school took me to court a couple of times. Police were involved. I assaulted a security guard. I think that was the last one. Yeah, I punched this fucking guy, and then I went to my class like it wasn't nothing. Meanwhile, you know, I'd have been in so many fights and everything already. It was like crazy, you know. And at that time, it was like rumble tumble stuff. So, but you know, but that's what happens when you live that life. And then I just kept on going. And then when I was like, but I ended up in this offsite school. It was a BOCES program. It was incredible. Saved my ass. Took me out of the element, even though I was in that element with other kids who were like me. By this time, I had already left my house. My son was born. I was 16 years old. You know, I left. I moved in with this girl. You know, and she was awesome, and I was just a fucking dick, and I was just laying up, and, you know, it was around that time. That's when I really, really got introduced to the hardcore scene. Enter Ezak and the rest of these guys I was hanging out with. I mean, I wasn't hanging out with him, but like I started hanging out with more hardcore kids, and we were going to the city. We were going to shows. Everybody was like a capital L, you know, just a capital L, like just misfits. You know, I wore out my welcome with my son's mother's family and my whole crew that I had with them. And because I was also I'm into like really, you know, drugs that they don't do. Like people in the hood, like, you know, they do cocaine, they do weed, and that was it. Nobody was doing, now, like kids in the ghetto are fucking doing every pill and all that shit. They're all fucking junkies. But when I was growing up in my day, none of the hood was like that. They were just crackheads. There were some people who sniffed coke, and everybody smoked weed. That was it. Nobody touched any of this other shit. So I was with guys who really didn't give a fuck. They were a few years older than me. We were going to shows. We were moshing, dancing in a fucking mosh pit, kicking the shit out of people, fighting outside the shows, fighting inside the shows, fighting in the street. Yeah. And that was my fucking life. I was in the 10th grade. That's what I was doing with my life. I was a full-time animal. And I was living with this girl, and I would just go see my son here, throughout the day. I was not responsible in any way aside from showing up, maybe some diaper money, some bullshit. But my son was young, so he didn't really need a lot, but I was around. But it was no excuse because I was under the influence at all times. And, so I was living with this chick. And it was like our party. She had her own house behind, I guess the lady, I don't know if the lady adopted her or whatever, but she had her own little house with, so the old lady who lived in the front, her name was Alma. And she was, she was cool. I didn't really know. I used to have to hide, right? So, but my house was the party house. We'd be rolling fucking R.I.P. Ed. He'd be coming home. I'd come home and there'd be people in my house, everyone doing drugs, everyone drinking. And it was like a small house where it was just like basically a big bedroom upstairs that was like it was like an attic. We made it into a big bedroom. And then downstairs was a living room, a bathroom, and a kitchen. And I remember this kid, Mario. I guess people who I don't care about saying their names, I'll say his name. I don't even know what happened to him. He lived there, and he was like, whatever. I didn't like him. I did not like him, but he was like somebody who was just like not to be trusted. He was a little bit slimy, even for me. And we were like dirt fucking bags. My boy across the street, he was on probation for a Molotov cocktail, allegedly. So everybody was fucking wild. But this kid was like the dirtbag of the wild kids. Anyway, so he lived there with Kirsten. We called her Queerston. And, but eventually I was just too much. I was too much to handle. I'd come home, I'd tell people to get the fuck out, or I'd hang out, whatever. I basically just used this poor girl, and she really loved me, man. It was crazy. I always tell even my fiance, like, dude, if I ever won the lotto, like, I would fucking go and give this girl $10 million. She had a really rough life, and she didn't make it any easier on herself. But sometimes when you have limited choices or limited exposure to good things, you go one of two ways. Like my sister, she went full-blown the opposite way of me, which was like scholastics and school and fucking college and all this other shit. Meanwhile, she had all the other stuff that she had to deal with. But me, I just went, the way of the fucking wolves, and that was it. And then, but meanwhile, my mom didn't like this girl. My mom didn't, her name was Kathy. Her name is Kathy. I shouldn't say was. Her name is Kathy Baker. She's fucking super cool, man. And I have nowhere to go. She took me in. I stayed there for a while, maybe 6 months. I don't know, 8 months or a year or something. I met a whole new group of friends. That's how I was. I'd wear out my welcome everywhere, So I did that, and oddly enough, and my mom didn't like her because she was, she was a girl from the street. And I remember when my sister died, like at the wake, when they have like 3 to 5 or 7 to 9. I haven't seen Kathy in like 20 years or more, 25 years. And dog, that girl had she may be from the street, but she had she has some principles, and she came to my sister's wake. My parents didn't even know who she was or what, and she was just cool, boom, respectful, said hello, said goodbye to Dara, and then just went on her way. It's hard not to respect that. I think I mentioned it to my mom once too. I said, yeah, Ma, that was the homeless girl that you threw out of our house the one day I brought her to stay over, because I would just show up with fucking random women all the time, And then at that time, she was living with this other girl in her house, and then until she went back with Alma. Either way, so, life unhinged. So I barely make it out of high school. I graduated from this program, which was really good for me. Sorry, I was picking at something on my show. It was really good for me because the program was in a school where like the like a bus came pick you up every day. And I lived with Kathy down the block from this girl named Tina, who was like one of the hot Puerto Rican girls, but could not. And she would have, you know, I don't know why, but all the other girls would fuck with her in school. And she ended up in this offsite school because it wasn't safe for her to go to school, you know. All the guys loved her because she was pretty. She was attractive, you know. I never had anything with her on any level. But we were cool. Anyway, she lived down the street, so the bus would pick me up at her house, and we'd go to school. And it was, and I met, you know, you meet, it's like almost, I wouldn't say like going to jail because it's not jail. But when you're in those environments, it's like, you know, you meet other people who are like you. You're like, holy shit, I'm going to expand my horizons. I met people from Nyack. I met people from Tappan Zee. And all we did was just barely do the schoolwork. We had this it was in an executive park. We had 3 rooms, no gym. Yeah. And I made friends with like, yeah, it's like, I guess it's an institution, but you don't live there. So like if somebody goes into like an institution and you're there for a week or 2 weeks, it's almost like, dude, you're like being in a group home. Like the people you go to through that experience with become like your fucking brood. You know, they become your fucking brood. So yeah. And I met people who were like me, and the drug use got worse, and I never said no. And a lot of times I was the fucking bad influence. Like, hey, let's all get acid and all trip together. Who came? Lisa came one time with like when I say don't take the brown acid, I'm like, woohoo, I'll take 2, you know? So that stuff. And we had like this store that would come every day. We called it the Roach Coach. And it was like, you know, like a store on wheels. The guy would come, he'd pull over, he'd fucking open up the side of the thing, and there's cigarettes and everything. We'd buy blunts, we'd buy all kind of stuff. He didn't sell beer, but we'd buy like, you know, cheeseburgers you could put in the microwave, all kind of stuff. On the way there to the school, like in the group, we called it the group home van. In the group home van, we'd pick up like 5 people who were from my district. So it was myself, Tina, Haitian Pat, and Lynn, my homegirl Lynn, who's also amazing, beautiful human being. And yeah, so we would go, and the guy who drove the van, and it's funny because I got that spot. As a rewind, I got that spot in that school because my Molotov friend, he got kicked out. So they had one spot open, and I got in there. And it's funny because my mom knew the fucking guy. My mom, the guy who ran that school was a fucking white South Bronx police officer. And he saw my name. He's like, what? And he knew my fucking mother. He's like, dude, I know your mom from that school in that place where like my mom smacked the fucking the pedophile. The guy knew my mom from that neighborhood. And bro, you got to be a bad motherfucker to be a white cop in the South Bronx in the 70s and 80s. He was awesome. Then he got into education, and that was his job. He was fixing fucked up kids. You know, his name was Mr. Kumba, Pete Kumba. He was the best. He had a fucked up wig, though, but he was the best. Hairpiece, whatever. Anyway, so we would go in the group home van on the way to the school. We'd stop at the bagel store. We'd rob the bagel store every morning, and we'd just steal all kind of shit. We were just doing regular teenage stuff. Every drug under the sun, every alcohol every day. You know, the party doesn't stop. And somehow, you know, it was one of those places where they kind of like, if you do your work, they leave you alone. So you do everything on computer. You never had any homework. We would just do all the curriculum stuff. And then I graduated high school early, maybe 6 months early. And then by that time, I had made like, you know, like attempts to like go back home, you know, because I had finished high school and whatever. And I was like, all right, well, I don't want to keep staying here. I don't know what it was. I think I just got an out, and I took the out, and I went home. I remember I went home one day. My mom was like fucking crying, and I asked her, I was like, can I come home? She's like, okay, you can come home. Meanwhile, I had like broken that whole home. I did. And it was good that I wasn't there. Whether the story is I left, or I'm telling you that they asked me to leave, But I broke that whole place. I can't even imagine what it was like for my dad and my mom to have a kid that was that out of control. Police, making babies, problems in school, drugs, alcohol, madness. It was madness. It was fucking madness. So when I get home, my dad's like, okay, you're going to have to fucking work, and I'm going to give you a job, or I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you a job. And he gave me a job. He gave me a job working with his friend had a business down on the commodities exchange. I was 17 years old. Wasn't even graduating high school yet. I was 17. And I got my first job in finance. And I was a runner on the New York Mercantile Exchange, which was probably the best job I ever had. It was just like trading places, 5,000 people. It was crazy. There was a lot, big time money. Not a lot of people, went to college. Everybody very smart. And I fit right in, because I was sharp. I was sharp, but I just wasn't smart. I was very gullible, and I was stupid in a lot of ways. But in some ways, I'm very sharp. So I fit right in. Because the only other jobs I had a summer job. I was a roofer. Well, really, I was on a gutter truck. And then my super incredible cousin Glenn, he used to let me work at the movie theater for him. He kept me out of trouble a long time. I always had a job since I was like 14. I always had some kind of job, whether it was working in the movie theater. I worked in the record store. Shout out Tapeville, USA. I worked there. All throughout this whole debacle, I worked there, and then I did crimes or sold drugs in the street or did whatever, like bullshit. I wasn't no kind of kingpin, but to support my lifestyle, I robbed people. I robbed my parents. This is what drug addicts do. Anyway, so I get my first job in finance. I'm like 17, and I was really, really good. And this is a job where you're allowed to drink and you're allowed to do drugs. Like, nobody's saying no. I used to buy cocaine in the Platinum and Palladium ring where they were trading that commodity. I'd buy it in the morning for breakfast. And there was a lot of tough people and a lot of rich people, and it was a lot of ignorance. And, it was a private club. So I worked there, and I got so bad. I met my good friend Jerry there. Who's a kid from Queens. And, there was other kinds of like white-collared criminals there. There were blue-collar criminals there. There was like, Italian pinky ring kind of people there too. It was beautiful. They were just like, and I was crazy. And they were like, oh, this kid will fucking, look at this little fucking kid. And it was a private club. Like, unless you knew somebody there, you could never get a job. Like, there would be like interns that would come for the summer that would work for like a huge company, like Dean Witter or whatever. They'd get like, oh, kids from like whatever university. Oh, you can go work on the Mercantile Exchange or on the Comex during the summertime as like an intern. Meanwhile, that was like my full-time gig. And I was there. And it was Caligula style. I met a guy fucking, Mike the model. This is where I learned about Caligula because he was so madness. The guy, women, cocaine, crazy. He looked like he had a lot of miles on him, but he lived an incredible life. And they called him the male model because apparently he was a male model when he was a kid. But by the time I met him, he already had colitis, and cocaine had taken all of his money in his life. And he was just like relegated to, cutting corners down there. So, I learned how to make quick money down there. White collar crimes. You want to call them that? If it's against the law, I guess it's a crime. That's what I did. So I did that, and I was there for like 2 years, and I was wearing out my welcome there. That's how off the fucking meat rack I was. I was just even partying too much for that. And like, I wasn't making mistakes, but I was just really, like my friend Jerry, he made a very bad mistake there, and it cost like my company like $50,000. And we were a small company. It was only a very small company. And like, it was like, oh my God, Jerry made an error. It was $50,000. It was so crazy, right? I never made that kind of error. I was under the influence all the time, and I don't know, my brain was working pretty good for me. So it was that, and it was all coming down. It was crashing down around me. Like, it was cocaine was was one of my downfalls. Yeah, it was just so bad. By this time I'm like 19 years old, and you're hanging out when you're 19 and you're hanging out with guys who are 30, who are in their 30s and 40s. You think of like, whoa, this guy is fucking, he's the man. Meanwhile, bro, I'm 40 years old. I ain't drinking with a 19-year-old kid or doing bumps with a 20-year-old kid. I would never I'd be like, bro, I'm a fucking loser. I wouldn't say I'm a loser, but like, I'd say that person obviously is an alcoholic. If, I start out, drinking after work in a fancy bar, and then I end up, my favorite place was this place called Steve's Pizza, which was on the corner of Church and Liberty down by the World Trade Center. And yeah, Budweiser in a fucking plastic cup, 11 of them, and then take the bus home back up to the woods, near the last stop and where I would park the car. And I would have to pee so bad I would just pee on the back of the bus on the floor. I didn't give a shit. And I'd get out and then I'd start that party again, from 11 till fucking 6 in the morning and then go to work. So that was my life. And no wonder why and I missed some really good opportunities down there to really make something happen. And there's not enough time in this episode for me to really get into it. But like, I left so much money on the table, like fucking, like schmillions. Just from being in the right place at the right time, and I left it all there. It was so stupid, looking back. But I probably would have just ruined it. It's okay. I never hung out with the right people down there. They were peripherally, like, people were like, almost like, they're like, dude, you get it together, man. You fucking, you have a little bit of talent. So I left there. I left that job before they were going to fire me or eventually let me go. And one of the guys in the pizzeria who I used to drink with, who I met there, he's like, his name was Georgie Greco. He's like, oh, you come work with me. I'll show you how to sell on the phone, blah, blah, blah. And really, I just went, and it was just a glorified, he would never hurt me, but he was an alcoholic and a diabetic, and I was already a full-blown alcoholic and a drug addict. And then, so I went and I worked with him for like 6 months, and I was like, bro, I can't. And then, and then my talents were shining over there in the firm I was working in. They're like, oh, we want you to come do this other job. And there was no more selling. Now they wanted me to, run like work on a trading desk and doing all this shit. Stupid financial stuff that I really don't want to get into. But my brain, that's the way my brain works. My brain works with like, okay, how does this piece go together? And I didn't want to do that. So he's like, you know what? Fuck these guys. I know where I'm going to take you. And he took me to the place where I would, make my first fucking big bag, which was, I became a stockbroker. I was 20 years old. I was 20 years old. I passed my Series 7, passed my 63. I was 20 years old. Let me see what year that was. Hold on 1 second. I'll tell you right now, just so we can tie this thing together. What is 2023 minus 2001, 22 years ago. So 44 minus 22. Okay. Yeah. So I was 20 years old. I passed my Series 7, 21 maybe. 20 or 21. No college education, none of that stuff. I worked and drank and drugged, and I really worked hard to get there, to get there. And I remember when I was studying for that exam, I talk about it now, even with my kids, where I'm just like, oh, I was under so much pressure because I was like, dude, if I don't pass this test, how am I going to make something of myself? That was the last time I actually cried. Like, I had a physical, I cried. I was under so much pressure, I cried. I remember my dad was just like, dude, what do you know, he like hugged me. He hugged me. He's like, it's going to be okay. You're studying hard. Meanwhile, by that time, when I got to that place, that's when I was introduced to heroin, and I became a heroin addict and all the other stuff. So, but I was going to work every day, and I was doing it, man. I was doing it half a bundle a day habit, plus all the alcohol, plus all the cocaine, plus all the weed, plus all the other stuff. I left like the blue collar street stuff alone. So I wasn't doing any kind of like anything that would jeopardize that money. I wasn't doing it aside from just like drinking and drugging and actually like stealing, which I didn't realize I was doing. So yeah, I passed my exam, 21 years old. I became like an actual stockbroker. And I was like one of those kids that you see in those stupid movies. That just like, hey, there's a lot of firms at that time that were down there. This is like in the late 90s. So this is 99, 2000, right? Who just like, hey, look, high school diploma, no felonies. Come here. You work on the telephone 14 hours a day. You make $250 a week. And we'll teach you the fucking ropes. And then you can make some money. But meanwhile, I didn't know that I was working at the place that was like the fucking Navy SEALs of this shit. So there's like, I've been contemplating watching that Wolf of Wall Street movie. I don't watch any of those movies because when the things that I saw and the way that I lived when I was down there, in like real life, every time I see it in a movie, I'm like, bro, that's not the way it goes. But I'm contemplating doing it. But anyway, so the place that I worked operated very, very much in the gray area. Very, very much in the gray area. And that's the only way I could, really describe it. And, I was selling, what do they say? Selling fast stories to slow thinking people. And I did business all over the world, blah, 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 Europe, Australia, whatever. I had clients everywhere, and I was misrepresenting who I was, and I was overcharging people and not knowing what I was doing and basically just taking their money. So I made it through their program, and I became like a legit on my own stockbroker. It was, by that time, that was 2001. 2001, 9/11 happens. I'm just about, by this time, I finished, I kicked my heroin habit, and I was just alcohol and cocaine and drugs. And, what year? That's 2001. So how old was I then? Minus 1979. Okay, so I'm 22 years old. So at 22 years old, 9/11 happens, and we move our office to New Jersey. Everybody, they weren't going to take me with them because I had just gotten on my own, and I didn't have any clients or anything on my own yet. I did all the things I was supposed to do in their program, but the people there advocated for me. Some of my friends, they advocated for me, and I'm grateful for that. I really am. They were like, yo, my firm used it as an opportunity to clean house. So whoever really wasn't making money, because they made you make money. Like the pressure, the silent, manipulative mind game pressure that they did was perfect, and it was beautiful. And if you succeeded there, like, you made money, but you didn't even know as you were going through the program what you were doing. You just knew, like, wow, I'm here. And then my friends, they've been out of the program, and they have their own clients, and they're only a few years older than me, and they're making $50,000 a month, like legit. Like they're taking home $50,000 a month. My boss, he went to his high school reunion. He's 28 years old. That guy made $10 million in 1 year at 28 years old. Crazy. So these guys, they knew the whole game. And they rode a huge bubble. They rode that whole .com bubble because that's at the tail end where I was at. And, bro, they were, when I mean crushing, unreal. So all the stuff you see in the movies, like I knew guys who had a house on Long Island, married a stripper, had the boat, had the Ducati. Like, I rode on the back of a Ducati 996 after they came out for 1 week with my boy going down the FDR. Like, all that shit, Ferraris, everything. It was crazy, right? So I'm 22 years old. 9/11 happens. We survived 9/11. I was down there. It's a whole nother episode. I don't even want to get into it if I haven't done it already. Yeah, that I was like a quote-unquote 9/11 survivor. Anyway, so we go to Jersey City and to another branch of our company, and they're like, they were salivating, couldn't wait for us to come there and work, because they're like, dude, how are these guys on Wall Street fucking making all this money? Like, we would get plaques every month of we had the highest grossing brokers every month. That we were running out of room on the fucking wall. These guys that were doing $300,000-$400,000 gross every month. Guys in their 20s. You know, so if a guy does 400,000 gross, he's taking home 180, 170 maybe. He's 60% payout, and then taxes. Yeah, I'd say maybe 180. It's a fucking lot of money, and then you go the next month and you drop another check like that at the teller, bro. It was crazy. So at 22 years old, now I'm at ground zero, not even knowing all the skill set they gave me. So September to that calendar year ends December. December, January. I'm going to blame the COVID fucking vaccine for my brain farts. So September to that January, I filed my taxes. I made like $40,000 or something, or 30,000, like nothing, you know? So for the whole year, I made like 40 grand, including for the whole 2001, I made 40 grand, right? Or something like that. And the next year, which was 2002, I was, 22 years old, turning 23. I made $160,000. And that was the first time I broke 100. And I was that age, and nobody could tell me no. I did that whole ride my way. I fucking, yeah. Nobody could tell me no. So I was in a position, and then the year after that, I made even more money. I don't even know what it was, but I remember that was the first year I broke 100. I was like, holy shit! I remember telling my dad, I was like, dude, I made over $100,000. I was like, I think it was like 147 or 167. So I remember the number. It was like that. I think it was 98%. It was 167, right? So, or 168. So whatever. But I was like, holy shit, I'm fucking making money. And like everything that goes with that is what I did. Like everything. And it was just, in hindsight, it was sad, you know, but at the time, it was at the time of my life. You know, I was a young kid. I had super expensive fucking clothes. I was staying in hotels. I was staying wherever, get on plane, go to Miami. I was fucking doing all of that stuff. You know, it was just drugs, alcohol, women. And then it just, you know, then it went like 50-50 or 60-40, just drugs and alcohol. I didn't even care about the women, you know, after a while. Yeah. And nobody could say anything. You know, nobody could say anything. Nobody could do anything. I didn't have to answer to anybody. You know, so 24, 20, and I sacrificed all of my sanity to get there. So that's 22. By 24, I'm limping into AA. You know, and I know because my last 2 years that I was out there, I was 24, 25, I think. My last 2 years that I was out there, I spent I didn't have anything really. I know I had I got sober, and I didn't even have an apartment. You know, my parents didn't care. I was living in their basement, coming home every few days. I got custody of my son, and I moved to Park Slope, Brooklyn. I had $30,000 in the bank, and I burned through about maybe $350,000 just with that whole life in maybe 2 years. And I was suffering. So that's how somebody gets sober at fucking 24 and stays. You know, I was seeing and hearing things that wasn't there. I was introduced to a program of recovery, and I started to change my life, and I started to change my priorities a little bit at a time. A little bit at a time. And all that money, everything went away. Everything. I went from that guy who was like fucking making $15,000, $20,000 a month, going tax exempt. I would go tax exempt and be like, oh, I'm going to get a $30,000 check this month, $27,000 check. And I went from that to a sober person, dad, you know, working. I got a job at a bank. I wound all that business into the ground. I couldn't, it just changed my life. I went from that, and then I was doing part-time jobs, being a fucking dispatcher at a black car service on a Nextel for $10 an hour. And from there to here, it would take 10 episodes to tell you how I got here. But one thing I didn't do, I stayed sober. I fucking learned from my mistakes, maybe the second or third time. So that the one thing I do remember is that, like, somebody told me in recovery, that first big bag of money, and you always fucking burn it to the ground. And in your life, you're going to get 3 of them. So I'm in like the middle of like the second one, maybe, where like we're doing okay. You know, we're doing okay. You guys know apparently I'm a landlord. You know, I have this business. I'm about to go into another business and buy another one. Hopefully all of this by the end of the year. And I'm getting married in a month. And my son is everything. He went to college. He's killing it. And I'm somebody that, like, you know, I'm somebody that has to introduce that old person to people by telling fucking stories like this. When they ask at a diner, like, how do you get sober at 24? Like, I didn't, you know, because I lived that whole life. You know, that whole life of, and at the end it was just, you know, it was torture. There wasn't enough drugs. There wasn't enough alcohol. There was never any sleep. I was staying awake days and weeks at a time. You know, I was about 135 pounds. You know, I all of that, all the externals, they didn't mean anything anymore. I just wanted the pain to stop. And I got lucky. And I know I'm lucky, so I'm grateful. So I'm going to stay sober. And I'm going to keep yapping. Please like and subscribe. I'm going to keep helping people. Maybe, and I know this show helps. Yo, shout out, oddly enough, before I go, I'm sorry. I know I went over the hour, and I haven't even gone close to an hour in a long time. But I'm going to shout out my fucking cousin's wife, who's also my cousin by marriage, because I fucking love her. Her name is Erin. And she just celebrated 1 year of fucking sobriety. Amazing. I love you. I fucking love you. You did it. And it's easier to get 1 than to stick around for 2. So we just do it 1 day at a time, 1 meeting at a time, 1 show at a time. You know, I could have ended up like Isaac, you know, and no offense to him. You know, I still love him and admire him from afar. But, you know, maybe I would have died along the way, but thank God I didn't. Anyway, like and subscribe. All podcast platforms, A Sober Experience. And we'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.